5.
Curry hits a three.
4.
Just for the try. Deep left field.
3.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
2.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
1.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve and Trevor.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steve Schill with the ever lovely Trevor Struthers. We're talking a bit of football and a whole heck of a lot of the NBA, including the netting situation that's going on in Major League Baseball. Kicking things off, Thursday night action, the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. Going into that game, who do you think would have won it?
I don't think it would have been too close in the way of thinking that it should have been Green Bay that definitely would win. That would win the game going in, right?
No, exactly. But I mean, the Bears, they scored 14 points. But I mean, we're talking in the first quarter, Green Bay was already on the board with 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean they struck early, and I mean really when you break down the favorites of almost any football matchup, it all almost falls back on the quarterback matchup, as if that's half the battle, right? That's your offense is the play of the quarterback, and Aaron Rodgers is going to win a vast majority of head-to-head quarterback matchups whenever you break down the numbers, and yeah, I mean whoever you put out there for the Chicago Bears just can't compare to the likes of Aaron Rodgers and what he can do.
Well, now, obviously, the Packers, it's a team that everybody talks about, but, there's one team that usually, for whatever reason, takes the cake, and that would be the New England Patriots. New England, wow. And they took on the Carolina Panthers. They lost 33-30. Again, Patriots, as usual, putting up a pretty good fight. But I don't remember the Patriots giving up 33 points in quite some time. What happened defensively?
Yeah, and they do it at home too, right? That's the big thing. This is, if I'm not mistaken, this is their second loss at home this year because they lose this time to Carolina, and then they had the Week 1 loss on opening night to the Chiefs. So they've already lost both their games. They're 2-2 on the season. Both their losses have come at home, and this is something that the Patriots just don't do. And a lot of the reason, no doubt, I mean, you can't look at that offense and blame the offense. I mean, Tom Brady over 300 passing yards. It was a shootout type football game. You can't blame the offense. It falls back on the defense, just like it did in the other loss against Kansas City. And, I mean, just watching the defense, I'm not sure what all is turned over from last year's team to this year's team on that defense. But it's almost like night and day in a lot of aspects. Fantasy football, what was one of the top defenses of last year? It was the New England Patriots. And here I wonder just how valuable that defense is this year in fantasy football, just because they do seem to surrender a lot of points and they don't seem to make those big plays. The New England defense, it does make you wonder if this team can get into the playoffs, because right now, 2-2, right now they're a 500 team. It makes you wonder. But if they do find a way into the playoffs, a bad defensive game is all it takes for you to be sitting on the sidelines come Super Bowl.
Just to mention it, because you can mention it, the Jaguars faced the Jets, and the Jets won. That was probably the least interesting game, you'd think. But the Tennessee Titans took on the Houston Texans. 57-14. 57-14. I don't care who you are. You give up 40 points, you have a lot of questions to ask. But, I mean, if you're the Tennessee Titans, you've already had questions asked this entire year. But I guess for the Texans, they were kind of trying to find their stride, figure out what's going to work, if Deshaun Watson, the quarterback out of Clemson, was going to do okay. And, I mean, he is doing pretty all right, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, he comes into that game, and you heard a lot of the analysts saying that, I mean, this has the potential to be a big game for him, and he goes out there and he delivers the way he did. 14 points. You wonder, too, what happened on the offensive side for Tennessee, because this is an offense that is pretty well run by Marcus Mariota at quarterback, and besides him, you don't have a star offense by any means, but they find a way to score points. Obviously, going up against a tough Houston defense, they weren't able to make those plays here today. And then Houston, the Tom Savage days seem to be behind them, and now they're finding ways to score points. And hey, I mean, with that defense, that was the thing that was really standout-ish for them last year. They just didn't have a quarterback and an offense to go with it. Now, if they've found something here at quarterback, this could potentially carry them into a playoff run.
Now, switching gears to the NBA. The first two games were between the Golden State Warriors and the Denver Nuggets, and then the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the LA Lakers. Now, the Warriors lost at home, I should mention. We'll get to that in a second. But Los Angeles Lakers losing to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And if you're looking at the Minnesota Timberwolves starting lineup, does it ever look very strange? So you have Taj Gibson, Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns, Jeff Teague, and Andrew Wiggins. Going into this year, a couple months ago, around the season ended, I doubt anybody would have thought that this would be the starting lineup for the Timberwolves. It looks decent. Taj Gibson leading the way with 18 points. Andrew Wiggins only getting 9, but he had a couple of steals and a couple of rebounds in there, but they played close to the same minutes. Maybe Wiggins is wanting to feel it out. On the flip side, you have the LA Lakers, who ended up getting Andrew Bogut and Brook Lopez. Okay, I just want to talk about that right off the bat. So Andrew Bogut, the guy who was on the Golden State Warriors, if you remember, and Brook Lopez, who's been on the Nets for a while and being basically the star guy for that. I think it's very interesting that the Lakers are going this way because they have a lot of youth in their back line, with Julius Randle, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, etc., etc. And so they're kind of counterbalancing it with the Andrew Bogut, Brook Lopez. Do you think that's a smart thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's sort of like you were just talking about the Timberwolves. It's almost like what they've done. It's the fundamental way to try to build a team. You have those young pieces that are in there that you've drafted and developed into NBA level players, potentially stars as well, in the case of like a Wiggins that goes first overall when looking at the Timberwolves. But you do need to find those spots to fill in the gaps. They're almost like a welfare version of the Timberwolves, I would say. But I mean, because the Timberwolves, they were able to go out and get a Jimmy Butler, get a guy that's like a borderline star player at his position, and as a guy that can go out there and be a leadership guy for those young guys. They've done a great job, the Timberwolves have, of building that team. It seems like the Lakers are trying to follow that exact same kind of format and are probably doing so to a bit of a lesser extent.
It'll be interesting to see kind of down the line how these guys are going to end up playing together and if it ends up being trade pieces down the line, because I could definitely see that, the Lakers using them for a little bit, and then if they're becoming too good. See, that's the question, I guess. If the Brook Lopez thing works out with all the rookies here on the Lakers, do you think that they would kind of go into the playoffs somewhat like the Leafs did, or do you think that they would try to like ship out house to do the lottery?
I mean, they would try to push for the playoffs. That's the kind of market that they're in, is that no matter what, you kind of got to push for that playoff spot. You could try to rebuild, and they've kind of done that over the last couple of years. They've tried to retool the team, and it hasn't been very good out on the court. I mean, that's how you get a chance to get a guy like Alonzo Ball that they get, second overall. So, I mean, that's what it takes for that. And now it's like, hey, we just got that guy at second overall. This could be a key piece moving forward. Let's try to make that move now for the playoffs. And it is very similar. That's a good comparison to the Toronto Maple Leafs and the season they just had passed. They ended up getting Austin Matthews first overall the year before. And then the following season, obviously, he goes out there and he scores like 40 goals, has a fantastic season, one of the best players in the league. They end up making the playoffs. It's very similar to potentially how this Lakers season could go if it goes well for this team.
The man, the myth, the legend, the MVP, Russell Westbrook of 2017, just got a massive 5-year, $205 million deal. And you got Carmelo Anthony and Paul George to be with you. Now, if you're looking on the flip side, Dirk Nowitzki, the guy's left like $100 million on the table to bring more people into Dallas. Obviously, that hasn't worked. We'll get to that in a second. But for the Oklahoma City Thunder, Russell Westbrook, giving him all this money, people are going to want to be coming to Oklahoma now. I mean, when Durant left, there was all this question, okay, is Westbrook going to leave too? Now it's solidified. He's going to stay, obviously, because the team's behind him. They were able to get the pieces they need, and now he has the biggest contract in the NBA. And it seems that every contract we're getting is now breaking a record in some sort, but for this one, obviously Russell deserves it, don't you think?
Oh, it's completely deserved, and it does make you wonder too, from a standpoint when it comes to a team like this and the potential of losing a player to money or a bigger market somewhere else, like what happened with Durant and OKC, and obviously having to think about Westbrook, is that you do wonder how the teams kind of assess that due to it, and they almost feel forced to have to make that big record-breaking kind of offer to a guy like Russell Westbrook, who just had one of the greatest seasons ever in the NBA, especially in recent memory. You feel the need to make that kind of big contract offer, or else he could turn it down and go elsewhere. And those first offers are always important, right? Because that kind of sets the table for how the negotiations go from there. So that first offer needed to be a good one, and boy, was it ever for Russell Westbrook.
Now, talking about the Dirk Nowitzki thing. Basically, this all started because a fan at an open practice gave him a note saying, "Thanks for taking all the pay cuts. Lunch is on me," with a $20 bill stapled to it. So, looking in previous years, there was a ton of times that Nowitzki decided, hey, you know what? I want to take a pay cut. Kind of like Tom Brady and some of the NFL players while they reconstruct contracts. This guy just took like a massive pay cut. So apparently, allegedly, he's left $194 million on the table to remain in Dallas over the years when he could have left and got max contracts. But, I mean, Trev, do you think that he is one of the few people that take pride over money, or what? Because the Mavericks haven't even really been that good. I mean, obviously they were great back when he was kind of in his prime and whatnot, but in recent years he's not really done much. Is this just? I don't really understand the meaning behind this unless he just really likes living in that area.
I mean, that could very well be it. That, and he feels like he's very invested into that community, and you do wonder. I mean, it's a big change. Whether you have kids, whether you don't have kids, regardless, it's a big change having to move from one community to another community and be surrounded by a whole bunch of people, really for the first time, a whole new fan base, like people to be around, the fan base, the team, everybody involved. So it's familiarity, and I feel like it makes him comfortable from that standpoint. But I mean, I think it says a lot about how humble he is. Like you said, his best years are behind him, and he feels the opportunity here too as well. That if he does loosen up the contract somewhat and open up some money for the team, that they can bring in some more big impact players that could potentially help him late in his career go on a run somewhere and maybe try to push towards some sort of playoff run somewhere down the road if they have that money available to offer out to other players.
Final thing we're going to talk about, the New York Yankees are looking at expanding the protective netting around Yankee Stadium. I think a lot of teams are doing that. If you hadn't heard, about 10 days ago, there was a child who was hit by a baseball by the dugout side, above a dugout. And if you know baseball stadiums, usually the netting ends where the dugouts start. But it was just past the dugout where this child got hit and had to be taken to the hospital. Players were getting fairly emotional about it, and people were now calling for netting to be put up. At the same token, there's other people saying, hey, you should be paying attention in that lower area. 2, children should not be in that area. And then back to number 3, you should be paying attention because it's just like a puck in hockey going over the boards. That's why they don't let you to go walking down during a game.
Yeah, I mean, all those arguments make sense for different reasons. Maybe baseball should take a key out of what hockey does and maybe put up some sort of plexiglass around the field and the netting on top of that, because ultimately that is a lot safer than not having anything there at all. And I think some people would maybe argue against the netting. Maybe I don't think it would necessarily obscure your vision. I mean, people that sit behind home plate, they deal with it already as it is. But, I mean, yeah, I could definitely see them extending the netting, not obviously all the way down per se, but like beyond, maybe just beyond the corner bases would make a big impact because, I mean, this is the top level of baseball. So, I mean, you have balls being thrown about 100 miles per hour roughly, and they're coming off the bat even harder. And those line drives, they can really hurt. And the whole argument about a kid being down low and paying attention and all that, first off, the kid's going to be a kid. Second off, sometimes just things happen. Nobody did anything intentional in that situation. It's just an unfortunate thing that happened, and you do have to work safety-wise to try to improve it. And I think there is something to be said about trying to maybe put up something protective to help protect those fans, because those fans aren't athletes, and sometimes the athletes have hard times with those line drives. We've seen pitchers get drilled with them. For fans, it's probably going to be that or worse, and it's all about safety first, especially when they're paying as much money to sit where they are.
That's it for this edition of BSS Sports. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at BSS Sports, archiving all of our works on YouTube at BSS Productions. For that lovely gentleman, Trevor, Struthers, and myself, Stephen Schill, we'll catch you next Monday.